I'm here today with my April reading wrap-up, and how many books did I read in April? We're about to find out. Hello book friends, I'm Jen and welcome to my reading life. Today I am here with my April reading wrap-up. I had a pretty good reading month in April. I read quite a few books, more than I was expecting to read, but a number of them were very, very short, maybe more along the lines of short stories or novellas, and I listened to quite a few audiobooks, so I think that really affected how many books I was able to read in the month of April. I thought before I got started, I would just give some stats on my reading from this month. I read 24 books in April, which sounds like a lot, but as I said before, some of them were very, very short. One was technically, one was a short story, and a few were very, very short as well, and they were audiobooks. But of those 24 books, I only finished 21 of them, and 3 of them were DNFs. 3 of them were rereads, 7 of them were audiobooks, 2 of them fell onto my TBR 24 in 24, and 7 were off of my 50 in my 50th TBR challenge, and I had 7 5-star reads, of which a number of them were rereads for me this month. So that's just a little overview of some of the stats for April for my reading life. I thought today that I would start with the 3 books I DNF'd this month, just to get them out of the way and talk about them very quickly, because I don't know that they're deserving of any more of my time. The first book that I DNF'd, I've already talked about on here, and that was A Girl's Guide to Kissing Frogs by Victoria Clayton. And this cover right here, this makes you think this book will be a light, frothy rom-com, and it is anything but that. At least the 40 or so pages I read before I was like, nope, this is not for me. And I'm going to be passing this along because I did not enjoy the first few pages of this, and I have talked about this already in one of my other tag videos. I'll link that down in the description box if you want to hear more about why this did not work for me. The next book that I DNF'd was How to Read Literature Like a Professor by Thomas C. Foster. And this book was just one that I just didn't feel like continuing to read. I started this, I think maybe back in January, and I just, after a few chapters, had no impetus to want to pick it up and continue. Again, I'm going to pass this along to someone else, and hopefully they can get some enjoyment and use out of it. The third book that I DNF'd was Murder in Old Bombay by Nev Marsh, and I listened to this on audio, a good chunk of it. It's a mystery set in India, and the premise sounded wonderful. It really sounded like something up my alley, but oh my goodness, it was so long and so convoluted. There were so many disparate storylines happening where I couldn't see how all of these threads were going to be connected. And because there were so many other things going on, I lost interest in the main mystery that we were trying to solve. And it just felt like it needed a stronger editor to make it a better mystery and overall story. I do really enjoy books set in India, and I thought this one could be a winner, but it wasn't. Moving on, I am just going to go through the books in the order that I read them. The first book I read in April was The Tale of Hilltop Farm by Susan Wittig Albert. This is a fictionalized tale of Beatrix Potter, and there are some little mysteries in here. I wouldn't necessarily call this a mystery novel per se. The mysteries are part of the story, but really we just get to learn about Beatrix Potter and the people who live around Hilltop Farm, and this is sort of right after she's purchased it and is not living there yet, but she's staying in the village and she's trying to get things ready so that she can move into Hilltop Farm shortly. And I really, really enjoyed this. It was so cozy and lovely. There are some sort of anthropomorphized animals in this, and I wasn't 100% sure at first how I was going to feel about that, but the animals only speak to each other. They can't speak to the humans. So it's not like humans and animals are interacting, which to me I think might have not really worked the way I would have liked. But this actually did, and I thought that was kind of a fun little element to hear what was going on from the animals' perspective. So you get some of Beatrix Potter's pets and some of the pets of other villagers, and that was just kind of an added little fun piece to this. And I'm really looking forward to moving on with the rest of this series. So I have to get my hands on book number 2. The next book that I read in April was Snow in April by Rosamund Pilcher. This is one of her shorter novels, and in this we follow Carolyn Clyburn. She's supposed to be getting married in about a week or so, and her father has passed away, and she lives with her stepmother and her stepmother's new husband, and then her younger brother. And she has an older brother who has sort of gone off into the world and is just sort of living a bit of a vagabond life. And the younger brother gets a letter from him and learns that he's in Scotland and decides he wants to go see him. So he and Carolyn set off on this journey to go find the older brother. And as they head north from London to Scotland, the weather turns very terrible and they get stuck in a snowstorm and they have to take shelter in this large home. I can't remember the name of the love interest in this, but they stumble into his world and into his life, and the story goes from there. This was sweet and light and frothy and very much of the Rosamund Pilcher ilk. Not necessarily one of my very favorites of hers, but still an enjoyable read. I thought some of the characters and storylines could have been a little bit more fleshed out. It felt a little surface level in some respects, and the romance happens very quickly at the end, and I felt like there could have been maybe a little bit more lead up to that, but otherwise an enjoyable read. I can never say no to Rosamund Pilcher, and I feel like she's always a good idea. Next up was my book group pick for this month, which is a book that I picked, and that is Pirouette by Susan Scarlett. Susan Scarlett is the pseudonym of Noel Streatfeild, who wrote the Shoes books, ballet shoes, dancing shoes, skating shoes, books I loved as a child. And when I saw that Dean Street Press had republished this, I really wanted to read something else by her. And since this was another book set in the dance world, I thought that would be really fun. Guys, this book was so disappointing. Nobody in book group liked this. There's a stage mother in this who is so awful. And I have done a fair share of dance and theater in my life, and I've met quite a number of stage mothers, and this one probably takes the cake. It was really hard to get past that. The main character, Judith Annell, she's the dancer. Judith doesn't know her mind, and it's very difficult to watch her sort of just give in to her mother, who just steamrolls over her. Judith is really bad about speaking up for herself, and she gets caught up in her mother's sort of woe is me. The mother is always pulling this, oh, I'm having one of my turns if anybody disagrees with her or says something she doesn't want to do or hear. And Judith goes along with that, and the husband sort of goes along with it. Anyway, this isn't good. I've heard some of the other Susan Scarlett books are really, really wonderful. If you've read any of them and can recommend them. I think I have Sally Ann on my Kindle to read. I may try that one next. But this one, this was so disappointing, and It was not a good month for me and books about ballet, because this one and The Girl's Guide to Kissing Frogs were both set in the ballet world. Very disappointing. Next up, we have Three Men in a Boat by Jerome K. Jerome. And I've been wanting to read this book for quite a long time, and then I found this copy in the secondhand bookstore near my house that I've really fallen in love with. And I decided to pick it up this month, and I actually listened to the audiobook, which was wonderful. This book is so silly and fun, and it's literally about three men and a dog in a boat. These three friends decide to rent a boat and sort of cruise down the Thames River, and it's just all about what happens to them and the misadventures that they get up to. And it's really just light and frothy. It's kind of a bit like a bunch of vignettes kind of strung together about what happens to them, and then they relay other adventures they've had in other parts of their lives. And I can definitely see rereading this when I need something just light and fun and something that's going to make me laugh. This is a book for that. Then next up, we have The Secret Garden on 81st Street by Ivy Noel Weir, illustrated by Amber Padilla. And this is a really lovely modern retelling of The Secret Garden. I heard Krista at Books and Jams talking about this and how it is a completely faithful retelling of The Secret Garden, only it's set in modern day New York City. And instead of the secret garden, there's a secret rooftop garden. And it's really wonderful. The characters are all there that you love from The Secret Garden. And I just thought this was really a nice modern retelling, because sometimes modern retellings just don't work for me. I've read a number of them, but I actually really liked this one, and I enjoyed the illustrations in the graphic novel. Just a really good, fun, light graphic novel read. Definitely recommend this one. Next up was another audiobook, which was a reread for me of a childhood favorite, and that is More All of a Kind Family by Sydney Taylor. I'm really enjoying revisiting the All of a Kind family stories, and this is just sort of the next set of adventures that the All of a Kind family gets into. I have so much nostalgia for these books, and I'm going to keep continuing to read through the series, probably via audiobook, because that's a really fun way to do it. Next, I have A Few Green Leaves by Barbara Pym. In this, we follow Emma, and she has come to stay in a village. Her mother has a house there, and she is taking some time off from her job. She's an anthropologist, and this is Barbara Pym's last novel. And I thought it was really interesting that she had a main character who is an anthropologist, and Barbara Pym sort of takes a bit of an almost anthropological look at village life through this book. We just get to sort of see the different characters in this village, how they interact with one another. And it says on the back here that there's a romance and there is a death. But really, it's not even like those things necessarily stand out. You just get a slice of village life in England at a certain moment in time. It's like this little snapshot, and I really enjoyed this one. I love Barbara Pym. I think she's such a wonderful writer, and she's a little bit cozy, but with a little bit of an edge. Next up, because April was National Poetry Month, so I did read a couple of things that are poetry. And the first one that I read was The Lady of Sheldon by Alfred Lord Tennyson. And I got this beautiful illustrated edition I checked out from my library. And I really feel like it enhanced the reading of the poem, which I've read before, but it's been such a long time and I forgot how wonderful it is. And then this poem permeated through my life for about a week in April. And it was just so funny because I had forgotten that Anne of Green Gables references this poem. I wasn't even thinking that when I picked it up, and I finally watched the 1980s Megan Follows version of Anne of Green Gables, and I mean, it starts out with her quoting the Lady of Sheldon as she's walking through the woods. And that just, it felt like a little bit of bookish serendipity. And I just thought that was so lovely. So it was really wonderful to read this. Loved this illustrated edition. Yes, and I do want to read more Tennyson. I had checked another book of Tennyson poems out this month, but I just didn't get to it. I'm probably going to see if I can track down a copy to own so that I can just dip in and out of it when I want. The next book I read was a reread, and that was The Lost Art of Keeping Secrets by Eva Rice. I listened to Miranda Mills's interview with Eva Rice. She interviewed her because the Comfort Book Club had read The Lost Art of Keeping Secrets maybe back in February or March. Anyway, I stumbled across the interview that she had done, and it just really prompted me to want to pick this up and reread it again. It's been many, many years since I originally read this. It's been a favorite book, sort of in the back of my mind. It's just one of those books that when I think of books I've loved, this one comes to mind. And it's one I don't often hear talk about, so it was fun to see that Miranda Mills has been talking about it. It's a lovely coming-of-age story. It definitely has a bit of a Nancy Mitford Pursuit of Love vibe to it. And Eva Rice does talk about how much she likes Nancy Mitford and how that influenced her writing. And you can definitely see it in here if you've read Nancy Mitford. And this is just a coming-of-age story. We follow Penelope Wallace. She lives with her family, her mother and her brother, in this crumbling old family home that belonged to her father's family, and her father was killed in the war. And then she meets Charlotte Ferris, and the two of them become friends, and Charlotte is just a lover of life. She's got such an exuberant personality, and it's just about her and Penelope and what happens to the two of them over the course of the months or year that this book takes place. And it's wonderful. It's a wonderful coming-of-age story. I can't recommend it enough. If you've enjoyed books like I Capture the Castle, I definitely think you will like The Lost Art of Keeping Secrets. The next book I read was The Unpleasantness at the Balona Club by Dorothy L. Sayers. This is the next book in the Lord Peter Wimsey series, so this is book 4. And in this one, a man is found dead in the Balona Club, which is like a gentleman's club that Lord Peter Wimsey is a member of. And he gets asked to come in because they need to figure out the time of death for this man that has died, because his sister also passed away at the same time, or around the same time, and her will is dependent on whether or not her brother died before her or after her. So there are some contingencies in the will as to who gets her money, of which there's quite a bit. And she has a ward, and the man has a couple of sons who are the nephews who could possibly get some money. Anyway, it's very complex, and Lord Peter is brought in to figure out the timing of all these things, and also whether or not this man died of just natural causes or was it murder. This was really good. I definitely can see the series ramping up and getting better and better as it goes along, and I really enjoyed this one. And as I mentioned in my May TBR, I'm still looking forward to Strong Poison, which introduces Harriet Vane, and I really think that the series is starting to kick into high gear for me. So this was a good one. Next up, I decided to pick up one of my favorite authors, and that is D.E. Stevenson. I read The Four Graces, which this is set sort of in the world of Barbara Bunkle, but she's not in the story, though one of the characters from the Miss Bunkle books is in this book. This is about the four Grace sisters. They are Liz, Sal, Tilly, and Addie, and they live with their father in Chevis Green. And it's just about their lives. They have a really lovely family life, and then their aunt, by marriage, comes in and sort of disrupts things. And there's also some gentlemen involved who might be potential love interests. And this was lovely. as all D.E. Stevenson books are. It's very quintessential D.E. Stevenson, lots of charm, lots of humor. I did think that some of the sisters' stories were more fleshed out than others, and one of the sisters does not live at home anymore, and so you don't get much of her story. So the Four Graces is maybe a bit of a misnomer, but overall, I really liked this. There were some storylines I thought could have been better wrapped up at the end, but this was still, I just love D.E. Stevenson, and I'll read every single thing that she's written. That is my goal. The next book I read actually wasn't a book, but I read the short story, The Yellow Wallpaper by Charlotte Perkins Gilman. This was for the Quiet Classics Club that is run by Vicky at Antipodean Reader over on Instagram. And I read The Yellow Wallpaper in college, and The Yellow Wallpaper was a story that has always stuck with me. Just images from it have never left my mind, and I was in college 30 something years ago so it's been a long time since I read this, and it was so lovely to revisit it, to discuss it with a group. I really appreciated everybody's insights that they brought to the story, especially the ending, which has a bit of ambiguity to it, and you can maybe read into it a few different things. And I actually liked this edition that I have has a essay at the end of The Yellow Wallpaper entitled Why I Wrote the Yellow Wallpaper, which was written, I think, about 10 years after Charlotte Perkins Gilman wrote The Yellow Wallpaper. She wrote this little essay that was published in the newspaper, I believe, explaining why she wrote it. And that was really interesting. And she had some personal experience with doctors and their really ridiculous cures for women, these rest cures that they felt like women should just rest and do absolutely nothing, not engage their brains in any way. And it ended up making women more crazy than not. And it was really interesting. And I'm actually hoping to continue reading through this. I may do it fairly slowly. There's a really long introduction to this edition talking about Charlotte Gilman's life and her stories, and I have found that really engaging, and I'm working my way through that. And I would just like to read more of her short stories because she's a very interesting woman and a very interesting writer. Next up was another short little book that I read, and that was Oh, It's You, Love Poems by Cats. This is by Francesco Marciuliano. This is just a sweet little book of love poems from the viewpoints of cats. And I love cats. We have 2 love bugs here in our house, and I completely related to these poems. If you are a cat owner or cat lover or know anyone who is, this would actually be a sweet little gift for somebody. And it was lovely to read these for National Poetry Month. So I highly recommend this for cat lovers. Then next was continuing on in my love affair of Anne of Green Gables that I was having this month after watching the miniseries, and I read Anne of Green Gables, the graphic novel by Mariah Marsden. And this was just a really fun way to revisit Anne of Green Gables and just kind of stick with that story after watching the miniseries. And I thoroughly enjoyed this. I highly recommend it. It sticks completely true to the story of the original, and the illustrations are lovely. Here's Matthew and Marilla. And I have since moved on, and I am now reading Anne of the Island. I'm just going to slowly read through it in May and finish it whenever I finish it. I'm just going to read a couple chapters a day and just savor being in Anne's world some more. Then next up was my pick for Read Christie 2024, and that was Murder is Easy. This is one of Agatha Christie's standalone mysteries. I liked this, but I didn't love it, mostly because I didn't connect well with the 2 main characters. And in this, Luke Fitzwilliam is on a train and he meets Miss Pinkerton, and she starts to tell him she's on her way to Scotland Yard because there have been some murders in her village and she's trying to prevent another one. And then he doesn't really think much of it other than that she's maybe a spinster living in a village, and she has some funny ideas about things. And then he hears that she has been run down and in London. And then he hears that there's been a murder of someone in her village. And then he decides to go down and investigate. And it's just about the murders and who done it. But like I said, it was okay, but it's definitely not a favorite Christie of mine. And I've started watching the new adaptation that is on BritBox. And actually, I kind of like that better than the book. I think the character relationships are more interesting. I think they've given it some modern sensibilities, but that's okay. I'm enjoying it. It's got some fun character actors in there from other British shows that I've enjoyed, and yeah, so this one, okay, but I am liking the adaptation. We're almost there. Only have a few more to get through. I'm going to talk about 3 books all together because I actually really wish they were compiled together as one audiobook. And these are Alexander McCall Smith. If you are familiar with the #1 Ladies Detective Agency featuring Precious Ramotswe, he has written a series of children's stories featuring Precious as a young girl. And I have been listening to them on audio. My library had them. I listened in quick succession to The Great Cake Mystery, Precious and the Mystery of Meerkat Hill, and Precious and the Mystery of the Missing Lion. Each of these audiobooks is only about an hour long. I would say they are for very young middle grade readers. So those just kind of entering the middle grade sphere. They're very sort of simple chapter books, but it's just fun to be in Precious's world and see her as a child. And I've really been enjoying that. And there's one more in the series, but I'm not sure my library has that one on audio. So I may have to wait before I listen to that. But it was just, I think I just needed something light and kind of palate cleansing for listening to in the car. And that was perfect. I did that the last few days of April and they were just fun, Then the next book that I finally finished, I've been reading this book for, I kid you not, I think 3 years. And that is 14,000 Things to Be Happy About by Barbara Ann Kipfer. This is literally lists of things to be happy about. And it's just fun. It's just fun to read through this. I've gone through spurts where I'll read a bunch of pages over a number of days or weeks, and then I'll set it aside and I won't look at it for a long time, and then I'll pick it back up again. But finally, this month, I decided I was going to finish it, and I did. As I went along, I got the idea from somebody who now I cannot remember who, to mark my favorite things in here. So I have done that. And I think it will be fun just to now pull this off the shelf, open it to a random page and look at some of the things that I really enjoyed and see if there's other things I want to now mark that I think, oh yeah, that really does make me happy. And everything from like Valentine candy hearts to summer houses to taking back road tours to an area that is happily underdeveloped and underpopulated. Just all kinds of fun things. If you like lists, which I love, that's the thing you should know about me. I love a good list. This is a fun little book that you can just pick up whenever and dip in and out of. Next up, actually, I read this earlier in the month, listened to it on audio, actually, about mid-month. And then for some reason, Goodreads did not mark it as me having read it in April. And so when I was updating my reading journal, it didn't get put in there. So I've had to put it in at the end. And that is my reread or re-listen to The Enchanted April by Elizabeth von Arnim, which is, in my opinion, probably the perfect April read. If you have never read The Enchanted April, it is about 4 British women who rent a house in Italy for the month of April, and it is just all about the 4 of them, and they're all sort of going there to escape something and have some peace and quiet. And it maybe doesn't turn out exactly the way they were expecting, but wonderful things happen. Nothing truly terrible happens in this book. The descriptions of nature are just wonderful, and I love these 4 characters, and I will revisit them again and again and again in many, many Aprils to come. So I had read the book in its physical format a couple of years ago, and it was fun to listen to the audiobook this April. 5 stars. Favorite book of mine. Love it. Then the last book that I read in April, and probably my favorite book of the month, was The Unselected Journals of Emma M. Lyon, Volume 4 by Beth Brower. I've talked about this series before. I am completely enamored of it right now. I have already started Volume 5 because I just couldn't wait. So if you have seen my May TBR, I have already thrown caution to the wind, and I am reading off task very first thing this month. But that's just sometimes how it goes. I like to read what I'm in the mood for, and I'm in the mood for some more Emma M. Lyon. And like I said, this is just the continuation of her story. I don't want to give anything away. I think you should start at Volume 1 and just discover Emma as you go along. If you don't know anything about this, it's set in London in 1883, and these are her journal entries. Emma has just returned to her home in London from being gone for quite a few years, and it's just all about what she gets up to. She lives in this very interesting neighborhood. Lots of strange things are afoot. There are some gentlemen in her life. She has a family member she lives with that they do not get along, and she has an aunt watching over her, and it's just all about her life. So wonderful. So excited to really get deep into Volume 5. Yes, fantastic series. Cannot recommend this enough. We made it to the end of my April wrap-up. My goodness, that was a lot of books. I tried to go through that as quickly as I could. Thank you for sticking with me if you made it this far. And I would love to hear down in the comments from you. Have you read any of these books that I read in April? Anything really stand out to you? Did you find anything to add to your TBR? Or anything else bookish you want to talk about? I love chatting with you in the comments. If you could give this video a like and then hit that subscribe button if you aren't already subscribed, it really does help out my channel, and I really, really appreciate it, as I appreciate you being here and watching and all your lovely comments. It's been so fun interacting with all of you over the past few months, and I can't wait to continue on in the months ahead as well. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll be back with another video very soon. Bye!